studios in New York City. This is Charlie Rose.
You know the face, but you might not remember the name. For almost 20 years now, Kevin Spacey's career has been a steady climb of strong roles and even stronger acclaim. He has won Tony Awards and Drama Desk Awards for stage performances and numerous film awards for his work in L.A. Confidential, Glengarry Glen Ross, The Negotiator, Swimming with Sharks, and The Usual Suspects, for which he won the Academy Award as Best Supporting Actor.
According to your statement, you're a short con operator. Running them those scams.
That's been suppressed. Anything in there is inadmissible.
Oh, I know. Sweet deal you have here. Total immunity.
Well, I do have the weapons charge. I'm looking at 6 whole months, hard time.
You know a dealer named Ruby Dima Verbal?
You know a religious guy named John Paul?
You know Ruby's in Attica?
He didn't have my lawyer.
I'm hired to watch the leads, to marshal my sales force. I'm given a policy. My job is to do that. What I'm told. Now, wait a second. Anybody falls below a certain mark, I'm directed. I'm not permitted to give them the premium leads.
You are nothing! You see this? This means more to the office than you. And yet, do you hear any complaints when I do this? These pencils more important. These pens more important. These paper clips more important. You miserable little crybaby! You don't like it here, leave! There are thousands of people who would kill for your spot, who would kill for the opportunity to be here. I could spit and hit somebody who could do this job better than you. This is the fast track to the top, boy. I don't see you breaking any speed records. Why can't you show a little backbone, huh? Huh?
We see a deadly sin on every street corner, in every home, and we tolerate it. We tolerate it because it's common. It's trivial. We tolerate it morning, noon, and night. Well, not anymore. I'm setting the example. And what I've done is going to be puzzled over and studied and followed forever.
You're getting something out of this, so you don't have to hobnob with rank-and-file cops who are going to hate your guts for snitching? Well, if they're making you detective, watch out. Some bureau guys are going to burn in this, and you're going to end up working with friends of theirs.
What about you?
I'm snitching 3 old-timers who'll be fishing in Oregon this time next week. Next to you, I'm clean and smart.
Is this your command or is it his?
You had him distracted. We saw an opportunity to end this. We had to take it.
No, you put me and those hostages at risk. That's what you did. And that's not how I work. First, we talk.
It was my call. We don't feel this man can be talked down.
Oh, really? I've been here a half hour. How do you know that? I have kept a zero casualty rate for 5 years, precisely because this kind of action is a last resort.
Now Spacey is back with a new film called American Beauty, co-starring Annette Bening. I'm pleased to welcome him back to this broadcast. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Tell me what this, I mean, the reviews for the most part on this, they're over the top. Steven Spielberg, when DreamWorks is his company, he's one of the 3 big partners, says one of the best films he's seen in 10 years. It's why he wants to make movies, he said. You got a 72-year-old cinematographer, Conrad Hall, right? You've got a guy whose principal writing had been for television, and you've got a director who'd never made a film before.
Right.
Tell me what this movie is about, and B, what it means for Kevin Spacey, and where it comes in your life.
Well, the film is an examination of 2 families in a suburban neighborhood in the United States, which we call Rockwell, which is, I guess, our homage to Norman Rockwell.
Yes, that's good.
Because many of the way the film was shot by Conrad Hall, who's the great cinematographer, many of the images in the film are rather, they're that kind of Americana. They're very simple frames. It's what's going on inside the frames that's a bit outrageous. And it's a story of a marriage. Annette Bening and I play Lester and Caroline Burnham. And I guess like a lot of men, and probably not just a few women in this country, he finds himself in a job he hates, with a boss he despises, in a marriage that's beginning to crumble, with a daughter who he doesn't feel he has any common ground with, and finds himself standing in a place he just no longer wishes to remain standing, and decides to, for a couple of things happen that are the catalyst for him making a decision to start to test life and shake it up and change and move in a new direction.
One of those, he gets turned on by her friend,
Yes.
because they're dancing at the gymnasium, and he sees her, and
yeah, there's a young teenage friend of his daughter's who he sees in this image, this kind of beauty that we in America identify as the great American beauty, or perhaps something to do with the American dream. And so it's not about a relationship that he and her have. It's not Lolita in any sense, although he does have a relatively active fantasy life about her.
And of course, to be available to her, it's a stimulus for him to do all kinds of things.
Yes, he begins to, he starts out kind of like a schmo. And he's, you know, like a lot of guys, sort of rounded and sort of defeated and kind of, and he decides to start, he quits his job, he starts working out, he starts smoking grass again, he buys the car he's always wanted. It's you know, some people have referred to it as a midlife crisis that he goes through, but I don't think what he's going through is a crisis. I think what he's going through is a rebirth and a reevaluation of who he is and what's important in life. And because of his particular journey, he then forces the people in his life, both his wife, his daughter, and others, to take their own journeys that are equally important in their lives. And almost everyone in the film ends up at a different place than where they began.
And for you, as an actor, you have done a series of lots of dark roles in which you have been awarded, in Usual Suspects, an Oscar. You went and did Iceman Cometh on Broadway, in London, and then on Broadway. And then you come to this. What does it mean to you?
Well, we've talked about this before, that I recognized a number of years ago that I did about 3 or 4 films in which I explored some rather dark territories. And
especially in 7.
Yeah, especially in 7. Gwyneth Paltrow's never been the same.
No, she hasn't.
And they were incredible to do. I mean, I had a fantastic time doing those. But what I realized pretty soon after that was that I laid this rather deep impression that I was an actor who always played very mysterious, very cryptic, very manipulative characters. And I started to feel that that wasn't the place I wanted to last in my career. I want to be able to go new places, do new things, and particularly start moving into parts that allow me to play just a much more vulnerable side of myself, much more personal side of myself. So I began to what I call the sort of slow burn towards something new, which was, I chose L.A. Confidential right after the Academy Awards for Usual Suspects, because there was a character who, while at first you thought he was going to be a certain thing, he actually runs smack into his own conscience, does the right thing, and then before you know it isn't around anymore. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil was a character that was quite ambiguous in the way that I approached it and played it, so that you didn't quite know what was black and what was white. It was more gray areas. Negotiator was an attempt to do a whole new kind of genre of film. So I began to take a careful step toward an audience being able to accept a performance by me in a whole new place. And finally, when I met with Sam Mendes about this film, and Sam said, "You're the actor I want to do this," he indicated to me that he understood the path that I was on, what I was attempting to do, and said he felt, and I felt certainly after reading it, that this was, for me, kind of the completion of that step.
Well, he said something interesting. He said, you know, his perception of you had been as sort of this Machiavellian character. You obviously, in every role, you somehow what came through was a kind of intelligence, no matter how mean, no matter how what.
And he also said, I tended to play characters that were about 7 or 8 steps ahead of everybody else.
Exactly.
And this is a guy who's literally living by his wits. He has taken life one step at a time.
You have to, in terms of the way you approach this, you have to do what with this character? You want to make him, you want people to like him? You want people to what?
Well, even though there
Identify with him?
Yeah, I thought people would, because I felt that he, for me, represented what I think a lot of people experience, what a lot of people feel. Sometimes no matter where you are in your life, whether you're very successful or whether you're frustrated by not being able to do the thing you want to do, you want to break out, you want to try something new, you want to get out of a routine, you want to stop the pattern.
But also, it's also about he wants it the way it used to be. He wants a car he's always wanted to have.
Yeah.
He wants sex to be like it used to be. He wants to have the passion and energy the way he did.
Yeah.
I mean, he's looking to recapture something that the way life works has, by attrition, taken away from him.
Exactly, and so there are things that he does in the film that are not always the right things. He's not always a good parent.
It's not great to be smitten with your daughter's friend.
There's things he does that, while those experiences may not be anyone in the audience's experiences, I think the emotional terrain is absolutely familiar.
It's a metaphor for change.
And it's also, it's approached in this script that Alan Ball has written with incredible humor. It is a very, very funny journey that
What
he
did
takes.
you see first, the script?
Well, I had heard that Sam Mendes was going to direct a movie. Now,
Sam Mendes, just for a second, is who?
Sam Mendes is a British stage director who has made a name for himself in theater, most notably with the revival of Cabaret that was both a huge success in London and in New York. And then he had an even bigger and more notorious hit with the play that Nicole Kidman did here called The Blue Room. But prior to those two things, he's had a long history of doing quite successful, engaging, visually stimulating productions of plays in London. I had just seen at the Dunmar Warehouse, which he runs in London, a production of The Front Page about 2.5 months before I read this script. Now, I knew that over the years, because of Cabaret, he'd been offered movies and he turned them all down. So I thought, well, what is he held out for? So I read this thing with a certain anticipation, and I knew immediately. I thought it was one of the most extraordinarily unique screenplays I'd ever read. And so I knew that here we have, all right, they don't teach you in the theater how to set up a shot, but they do teach you how to tell a story in 2 hours, how to keep an audience engaged, how to work with actors, how to understand how to keep a plot moving and make it engaging. So I knew on those levels we'd be fine, but I could not have been prepared for the way that he thinks cinematically. I was, even though he kept us quite informed as we went along, he showed us, he storyboarded the whole film. He and Conrad Hall started very early on deciding what they wanted the look of the film to be, as he brought on production designers and costume designers. Every single department, he was so clear with what his vision was that everyone, I think, was on their game in a way that they should all be extremely proud of.
All right, I think we set it up for you. Here is a story about a young man, approaching, how old is the character?
42.
42 years old, married to Annette Bening. She is in real estate. He, in fact, is a guy who's a salesman for a media magazine. One daughter, there's a relationship with the daughter, finds herself with the guy next door. He's an interesting case of his own. Her best friend is this very stunning young blonde friend who sort of represents some of the fantasy of America in part. But it begins with a conversation in part that takes place here. Take a look at this and you will see some of the characters I have been talking about. Roll tape.
Mom, do we always have to listen to this elevator music?
No. No, we don't. And as soon as you've prepared a nutritious yet savory meal that I'm about to eat, you can listen to whatever you like.
So, Janie, how was school?
It was okay.
Just okay?
No, Dad. It was spectacular.
Well, you want to know how things went at my job today? They've hired this efficiency expert, this really friendly guy named Brad. How perfect is that? And he's basically there to make it seem like they're justified in firing somebody because they couldn't just come right out and say that, could they? No, that would just be too honest. And so they've asked us. You couldn't possibly care less, could you?
Well, what do you expect? You can't all of a sudden be my best friend just because you had a bad day. I mean, hello. barely even spoken to me for months.
Oh, what? Your mother of the year? You treat her like an employee.
I didn't take that as a love gesture from the wife.
No, that was Annette's disapproving look,
Yeah.
which she gives Lester quite a few times in the film.
Talk about the setup there and the cinematography. I mean, you told me a story about Conrad Hall, 72. He's done some great films.
Includes Butch Cassidy, The Sundance Kid. One of my favorite films he shot was Searching for Bobby Fischer,
Yeah.
which he shot from the kid's point of view. He's 72, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
you know, and Conrad would work a 16-hour day, and then he'd be setting up maybe the final shot of the day, and he'd look through the lens. And when he found the shot, when the light was right, when he was ready for us to shoot, he'd go, "Yes, I got the shot, let's go!" And I thought, man, do I want to be
At
like that at
72.
72? Do I want, when I find a moment, boy, I want to be able to react like that.
Yeah. The arc of this whole thing in terms of, you know, you shot this with a relative, it's $15 million to make this movie.
Right.
DreamWorks said to Sam Mendes, as long as you keep it under $15 million, we'll leave you alone.
Leave you alone. And in fact, to pay credit to them, Steven Spielberg, when he read this script, he read it on a Saturday night, and on Monday morning he said, let's make this movie and let's not change a word. Let's not water it down. Let's not do anything to it. And that's really, in my experience, one of the first times that a script has not gone through a major rewrite. And the writer is with us right through rehearsals, all through the shooting. So any changes we made were organic changes that we discovered.
Alan Ball had never written a script for a movie, or he had, but it had never been made into a movie?
To my knowledge, he had never written a script for a movie. He had done Sybil, that series, for about 4.5 years.
Television series.
Television series, which apparently he was just tortured on. And then at night, he was going home and writing this, so we're grateful to that. The arc of how to develop the character of Lester was, we were on a short schedule. Very often, because I squeezed this in between the London and New York runs of Iceman, we would shoot the early parts of Lester's experience in the morning and the later parts of Lester's experience in the afternoon, depending on the locations we were at. So I had to get in the best physical shape possible, and because he does go through a rather dramatic transformation. And so the trick for us was, because there's never a scene in the movie where there's an epiphany, where he suddenly changes, we also didn't want there to ever be a moment where you saw him change, but where it was this evolution, where he just organically evolved into a new person, spiritually, emotionally, physically. So you pointed out in that scene how sort of defeated I look, and that was incredibly helpful to have Sam Mendes there, who really helped me know if I was, I mean, often he'd say, look, you're slouching a little too much in this scene. All right, you've worked out a little bit now. You've got to stop looking like Walter Matthau. Come on, get it up.
Right, get it up.
So he was incredibly helpful for me to know where we were, because the journey was such a subtle one. And it was one about spirit and identity with yourself and your place in the world and what you think of yourself, that all of that, we just wanted to have it just almost seamless. And I think he did an incredible job in helping me stay on track.
Someone said that the audience loves this character while they're shocked by what he does. You know, all the whole range of things. Roll tape. This is where Lester meets Jane's friend, his daughter's friend, Angela, who's played by Mina Savari. Mina Savari. Here it is.
Hey, I really enjoyed that.
Congratulations, honey. You were great.
I didn't win anything.
Hi, I'm Lester, Janie's dad.
Oh, hi.
This is my friend, Angela Hayes.
Okay. Good to meet you. You were also good tonight. Very precise.
Thanks. Yeah, nice to meet you, Angela. Honey. Oh, I am so proud of you. You know, I watched you very closely. You didn't screw up once. Okay. We have to go.
So what are you girls doing now?
Dad, we're going out for pizza.
Oh, really? Do you need a ride? We can give you a ride. I have a car. You want to come with us?
Thanks, but I have a car.
Well, you have a car. Oh, well, that's great. That's great. Because Janie's thinking about getting a car, too, soon, aren't you, honey?
Dad, Mom's waiting for you.
Well, it was very nice meeting you, Angela. Any friend of Janie's is a friend of mine.
Well, I'll be seeing you around then.
Could he be any more pathetic?
I think it's sweet. And I think he and your mother have not slept together in a long time.
It's great. Man, to see you reacting after watching that clip, after having seen it 100 times.
It's very fun, but actually a couple of times in a couple of cities, because we've been on a tour.
Yeah.
I've snuck into theaters and just listened to regular audiences react to the movie. It's like they're at a football game. I mean, actually, somehow I'm in the back going, "Shut up! You're missing dialogue. There's good stuff coming. You're missing." It's actually great to hear audiences really roll with it and roll with the humor, and then the film goes to a much quieter and more poignant place by the end, and to hear them as still and as quiet as we hoped they would be is quite wonderful.
All right, I want to get to that. And let's run over to Annette. Who is Annette Bening in this film?
Well, Annette is, like Lester,
your wife,
yeah, she plays my wife, and like Lester, she finds herself in a place where she's extremely frustrated by her life. Clearly, she recognizes that the marriage is not where it used to be. She's in a business that she finds very competitive and in fact, is driven to succeed in a way that Lester just can't abide by. He just doesn't care anymore. And she's this focused, I mean, actually, I was a little worried for Annette while we were shooting because she became possessed by this
should have
character.
been worried for Warren, not for...
Well, I was a little worried for the kids, actually. But there were scenes, for example, there's a scene, I don't know if we'll show it, but there's another scene at the dinner table where she kind of goes off. And I was supposed to cut her off in the course of she was supposed to just say a couple of things, because I quit my job, and this is in the scene where I announce it.
Right.
And she started actually improving because I didn't cut her. I was so startled by what she was doing.
So she just continued the dialogue with
off script, and kind of it was sort of like watching someone do a Freudian slip in character. It was just bizarre.
She was into the role.
She got to the end of, I think she said 6 or 7 things that she wasn't supposed to say, and then she went, "Damn it, you're supposed to cut me off." And I said, "I know, I'm sorry." It was just a beautiful thing to watch.
All right, this is where we'll see she, because you're off onto your own thing, and she decides that she, in the angst of competing with this guy played by Peter Gallagher, whose buddy, what was his name?
He plays a character named Buddy Kane, who is a real estate
and he's
agent.
a winner at that business.
He's the guy in town who's the top real estate guy, so she looks at him as he's the best, and she's rather in awe of him.
Yeah, and they have a little meeting that you go to, and what you said to him. This is so great, we don't have this. And what you said, "I met you before," and he says, "I don't remember
me," and I say, "That's all right, I wouldn't remember me either."
So your self-esteem is not way up there,
I'm really,
is it?
Yeah.
So why is it that this character, goes and gets a job at McDonald's or whatever the fast food place is?
Well, he does. He at one time in his life when he was in college, he had a job at a fast food place, and he's reminded of that in a scene with this next-door neighbor that you talked about, who Wes Bentley plays, this young kid named Ricky Fitz. And Ricky has all this. He's a buff with a video camera, and he has all this incredible amounts of very expensive equipment. And Lester says, "You know, when I was your age, I worked at a burger joint. I flipped burgers just to be able to afford an 8-track."
Yeah. This guy,
this guy says that sucks. And he says, "No, in actuality, it was one of the happiest times of my life because all I did was party and have fun."
And then I had party,
Yeah, so he decides, I think, in his sort of effort to sort of go back to that feeling and that emotion and that joy in his life, he decides to apply for a job at a fast food place that in this film is called Smiley's.
All right, roll tape, here it is. This is a scene where at the burger place he comes to grips with his wife and her lover.
I'll have a double smiley sandwich, curly fries, and a vanilla shake.
Make that 2.
That'll be $7.98. Please drive up to the window. Thank you.
I think we deserve a little junk food after the workout we had this morning.
She was best, Janine.
She was terrific. You know what's interesting about that scene is that we reshot that because, and Sam's talked about this publicly, our first couple of days of shooting, he just thought was a disaster. He absolutely, we'd shot some of the Smiley stuff, and he looked at it and said, I hate the way it's lit. I hate the way you're acting. I hate the way it's costumed. I hate the way it looks.
We're doing it over.
Can't we please do it over? And DreamWorks, you know, sort of went, the first 2 days of shooting, and they did. They let us go and redo it, and it was absolutely
much better here.
Oh, much better.
What was the difference, do you know?
Well,
it wasn't lit well.
No, actually, the way it was first time is they weren't in a drive-through. They actually walked into Smiley's, and it was somehow it was better in the drive-through, and our costumes changed, but Janine stayed the same. She
you are
terrific.
busted.
You are busted. She's true.
We've got you right here. All right.
Well, that's you know that's the thing about the way Sam cast this movie too, is that every single role. I mean, we've talked about Annette, we've talked about Peter Gallagher, but I have to mention that these three teenage actors, Thora Birch, Mina Savari, and Wes Bentley.
Thora Birch plays your daughter.
Plays my daughter. Mina plays the young friend of hers, and Wes plays this kid next door. I think at a time, I don't want to get in any trouble, but at a time when we've had a glut of films that supposedly deal with teenagers and their issues, it sure is nice to have something that's approached with enormous maturity. And I think honesty by these three young actors. I think one of the reasons why we've gone around and we've been doing it at all these colleges is kids are just going nuts for these three performances. They're really quite startling.
Yeah, there are no bad moments here. In other words, there's no weak performance here. They all looks good. I mean, this is just not me. There are a whole lot of people like this movie. Take a look at this finally, because I want to get past this. This is where Lester speaks up at the dinner table. Roll tape.
Today I quit my job.
Oh, and I want to thank you for putting me under the added pressure of being the sole breadwinner now.
I already have a job.
No, don't give a second thought as to who's going to pay the mortgage. We'll just leave it all up to Carolyn. You mean you're going to take care of everything now, Carolyn? Yes, I don't mind. I really don't. You mean everything? You don't mind having the sole responsibility? Your husband feels he can just quit his job and you don't...
Will someone please pass me this
I'm not going to be a part of this.
Sit down!
Now, what's great about this is there's somebody taking control of their life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And this is a guy who just sort of given up. Nothing was working. He was masturbating in the shower.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, he's saying, you know.
Yeah, he actually moves from the shower to the bedroom. It's quite a progressive move in the masturbation department.
Talk to me about the idea, while we stay with this film, of perception and how it involves perception.
Well, I think that the film explores and hinges on people's perceptions of each other and, in many ways, their perceptions of themselves. And I think it examines how easy it is and convenient it is, often, for people to see what they want to see, believe what they want to believe, and very often can be dead wrong. And how that can not only lead to misunderstanding and can lead to confusion, but it can lead to tragedy. You know, we have a lot of events that happen in our country that shock people, you know, events that seem to have no bearing on our relationship to what we think is reality. Things happen that just, and you hear people say all the time, how does a thing like that happen? And I think this film, it doesn't answer those questions, but it begins to explore things that are going on in the subterranean levels of most people's rather complex lives.
Yeah. So it's a film about, say, I hate this word, but it's suburban morality. It's something. It's also a film about what's going on beneath people's lives, the outward sign of their lives. It's about teenage angst. What else?
Marriage, work, your relationship with your neighbors, and I think it you know, I've heard people say it's about suburbia, but I suspect that, you know, just as many of these things are going on in the urban centers, and I think that people just are recognizing something that for them is very familiar.
What's interesting about that, if you look at, here's Mendez, who is not an American. Roman Polanski was not an American when he made, you know, Chinatown.
Schlesinger wasn't when he made
John
Midnight
Schlesinger
Cowboy.
made Midnight Cowboy. I mean, what is it about foreign directors who can come over here and capture a slice of America?
It's perhaps the distance that they have on it. You know, Sam very often in the course of rehearsals or shooting, he's the kind of director that doesn't necessarily say, I want you to do this in this scene, but he will evoke a story of his own childhood. He'll tell you something about his relationship with his father or his mother. So even though he was from Britain and raised there, he clearly had experiences and clearly had the emotional makeup to make us understand where we needed to go in a particular scene. So we all shared a great deal about our lives as we went through this. There was a trust that was built because of Sam, because of how open he was about his own life, about his own experience, that we began to share. You know, Annette would tell us stories, and I would tell stories, and Wes and Mina and Thora, we all, I think, trusted each other so much and wanted so much to be able to be in the right place emotionally for these characters, and for it not to be a caricature, but a real examination of feelings that I think almost everybody has.
Do you see anything in Mendez that reminds you of Mike Nichols?
Oh, sure. I mean,
they
first
both
of all,
stood stage and film.
Yeah,
Nichols played a prominent role in your life.
Yeah,
with Hurley Burley and.
Well, and also you look at Mike Nichols' first movie, which is one of the great, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, is a great examination of marriage.
And then The Graduate, which is
and
about
then The Graduate.
Holland.
Yeah. And in fact, I know that Sam and Mike are friends. I know Mike saw the movie here. He liked it. I think he called Sam and said, oh, "Go to hell" or something, because it was so.
Why
good.
didn't I get it?
Yeah.
Let me go back to. Was it you went to high school with Val Kilmer and
Mayor Winningham?
Mayor Winningham. Chatsworth High School.
Chatsworth High School in Southern California. Yeah, we were all in the same drama department at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, what was it about acting for you?
Well, I sort of fell into it, and then you know, I was in military school, and then when I got out of military school,
were you in military school? Because
I was a naughty little child.
You were, weren't you?
And then I got out of it, and then a guidance counselor suggested I take theater, and so I did that, and then I decided, when I saw a production of a play that Val and Mare were in, of The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, when I was in 11th grade and at a different high school, I thought, I want to work with those people. I want to go to that place. And the teacher at that school, the drama teacher, Robert Corelli, he saw me in a play and asked me if I would consider transferring to Chatsworth. And so I did. You had to fill out forms and go to the principal's office and draw a name out of a hat, and I actually got to be one of the students that transferred there.
Yeah, did you and Val get Best Act, Best Something? You win some award there?
We were, yeah, all of us were involved in a lot of drama festivals. Mare was writing plays, Val was writing plays, I was directing things. We were doing monologues at Shakespeare festivals, and we won a number of awards that year. Val went on to Juilliard.
And you followed him?
And I followed him there 2 years later.
At his recommendation? Or?
Yeah, he said that if I was serious, because I was in Los Angeles sort of auditioning for bad television series and doing stand-up comedy in bowling alleys, and, you know, it just wasn't really going well. And Val was really the person who encouraged me that if I was serious about wanting to be an actor, that I should come to New York.
Now, let me just get this, see if I get this right. You're in L.A. auditioning to be on The Gong Show and not getting on.
Yeah, yeah.
They
you
were
know
not
things aren't
taking
going well when you get pre-gonged.
You never made it to the finals.
I never made it. I never made it.
You were trying to do stand-up?
I was doing stand-up.
Or you had done stand-up?
I was doing stand-up at the time, and I went and, you know, because Mare had been on it. See, Mare had gotten on The Gong Show. She won $500.
So you said $500. That's not a bad deal.
That's not bad. It's
and
better
he
than
called
selling shoes, which I ended up doing.
Val said, "Come to Juilliard."
He suggested it, and I auditioned and was fortunate enough to get into that class, which was group 12. There were 28 of us in that first year that I was
but
there.
here you come. I mean, you make a decision on your own, which I'm looking for some insight into you. You make a decision that you don't need to graduate from Juilliard. You'll just take your life into your own hands, right?
After 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I do believe that if I hadn't left, they probably would have asked me to leave about 4 days later.
Because of your, quote, attitude.
I don't think I was a particularly good student because I don't think I had learned yet what it meant to be a team player.
Really? So it's not that you didn't have acting skills, it was because you didn't have behavioral skills.
I think that I basically, I don't think that I didn't work well within that system, and I fought it a lot. And I think that, you know, I also, in a weird way, was sort of ready to leave, although I didn't even know, I had no prospects, I had no agent, I had no money. But I thought I was ready to start. And I think that I was ambitious, and I think that I was driven, and singularly driven in a kind of selfish way. And it took me a couple of years to realize that that wasn't going to get me too far.
But did you even then think that it's going to be where it is now, where you, I mean, this is the best moment in your life, the best moment. You're coming off Iceman Cometh, which was a huge success on Broadway. You just got this film. When you, back then, did you know, look, watch me, guys. I'm going to make it. It may not be overnight, but I'll get there.
Well, I think I think in some ways, you know, there's a line in Iceman that in order to win at Revolution, you have to kind of put on blinders, and I think that's probably true in an acting career as well. So I think I did.
Convince yourself that you
strapped on blinders and said, "I'm going." Now, through the years, you begin to make realizations about yourself. You begin to make assessments about your relationship to money, to fame, to what all those things mean.
What price you're willing to pay.
What price you're willing to pay, and what you're willing to do. And at what point, I mean, for me, a great number of things changed for me when I met Joseph Papp and when I worked at the Shakespeare Festival in the stockroom and you know, helped be one of the interns on his incredible campaign to save the Morosco and Helen Hayes theaters, which were demolished. And I think at that point, I had never really embraced the idea that I was a member of a community. And as a member of that community, I had a responsibility to it and a responsibility to my talent.
That's a great story about Joe Papp. Joe Papp sees you.
Yeah.
On stage.
The first job I got out of Juilliard was I got Shakespeare in the Park, and I played a messenger and a spear carrier and a rock, and whatever they asked me to do. And so I'd met him. He'd come around. He liked to go to rehearsals. He liked to meet young actors. And then I couldn't get hired. I could not get arrested after that play was done. And so I went back to the festival, and he remembered me, and he met with me, and I said, I don't want to be a waiter, and is there a job? So he stuck me downstairs in this sort of horrible basement room.
Well,
where
looking around like this.
Well, it's not unsimilar, actually, in a strange way. Yeah. And I, you know, hand out pads and pencils and things to directors and stage managers, and then eventually worked my way up to his office. At the same time, of course, I was trying to get acting jobs. And about 6 months later, I got an off Broadway play on 13th Street that we did at a dance space. And I got a little review in the Village Voice, my first New York review. And in fact, in that review, they compared me to both Marlon Brando and Carl Malden in the same sentence. So my friends called me Marlon Malden for about a year after that. And Joe apparently saw that, because he read every paper. And he decided to show up, see the play. He surprised me one night. I was terrified, but he came. And the next day, he called me into the office. and he fired me.
Because you're fired.
He said, "You're done here." And I didn't understand what I'd done. He said, "Well, what you did was, I saw you on stage last night. That's what you should be doing." And so he pushed me out in a way that was probably the kindest, most fatherly, gentle shove. Go do what you're supposed to do. And 4 months later, he and his wife Gail were in the opening night audience of my first Broadway play, which was a production of Ghosts, in which I played Lee Volman's son. Originally directed, oddly enough, although he was fired out of town, by John Madden, who went on to direct Shakespeare in Love.
Well, you also came to the attention of Mike Nichols, who gave you a role as what? As a understudy or for Hurly Burly?
Yeah. I'd gone in to meet him on a national tour of The Real Thing.
Yeah.
And he liked what I did, and he said, "Would you come over and audition?"
Which
for
he
Hurly
did on
Burly?
Broadway.
Yeah.
The Real Thing.
So then he gave me an option. He said, "You can either go on the road with The Real Thing, you can stay in town and do the understudy in Hurly Burly," and I decided to stay in town, because I'd been on the road doing original theater for a couple of years, and that was a fantastic break for me, because not only did it begin my relationship with Mike, and he ended up putting me in my first film role.
Heartburn.
Heartburn. I mugged Meryl Streep.
With orange hair.
I had really spiky orange hair, and he wanted me to sound, he told me one day, I want this guy not to, maybe it's his first mugging. So I sound a little like a cross between Minnie and Mickey Mouse. There's an odd sort of voice quality in that, and that also was an incredible job, because I got not only to understudy one role in that, I understudied all the male parts and went on in 3 of them, and lo and behold, some 15 years later, I did the movie version of Hurly Burly and played the same role I'd understudied.
You and Sean.
Yeah, which should give hope to understudies everywhere.
The interesting thing about that is that The Real Thing has never been made into a movie, which I always thought it could be.
It's a terrific play.
It's a terrific play.
It's a very terrific
I don't know. I mean, I don't know who optioned it. Somebody I know optioned it, and it's never been made. Wise guy. So if somebody calls you up and says, "Come out here to Hollywood," or did you go out looking for a TV role?
Well, I didn't. I never really wanted to go and knock on doors, because I sort of took my cue from all the actors I really admired.
Who didn't go on TV?
Didn't go on. No, well, they did, but there was a different time then when they were going on TV. But I sort of thought, well, most of the actors I admired really made their marks in theater. And then Hollywood came knocking. So I thought, well, let me just try to do that. But there came a point when I'd done a couple of these smaller films. I did a mini-series. I'd been on Broadway with Jack Lemmon in Long Day's Journey. And my agent said, you've got to go to Los Angeles. They got a name, but they don't have a face. They've got a, you know. So I said, all right, I'll go. Now, on the first day I was there, I met on this series Wise Guy, and met Stephen Cannell, and they offered me this show, which I was reluctant to do because I didn't think I wanted to do a series. Yeah. But as it turned out, the character they wanted me to play, they were going to kill off in 7 episodes. Yeah. So I thought, well, here's a great opportunity to find out what it's like to do a TV series, but not be tied to it for 5 years. So 2 days later, I was on a plane to Vancouver, and I started shooting that role, which actually became a kind of a cult hit, that series. Yeah. It was a fantastic piece of writing by Stephen Cannell and David Burke. And that really sort of was the first time that anyone had ever really seen me in film. But it then took a number of years before I started to find film roles that offered me the opportunities that eventually led to more stuff. And I, in between, always did theater. I did Lost in Yonkers in between, all that. So I've sort of tried to balance it back and forth.
Tony for that?
I got a Tony for...
A nomination, or I got the award?
I actually got the award.
You played...
Uncle Louie.
Uncle Louie, that's right, yeah. Usual Suspects. Were you always destined to play the role that you played?
I met Bryan Singer and Chris McQuarrie, the director and writer of that, at a screening of their first film. They did a small film called Public Access.
Yeah.
And I met them that night at that screening, and I said, you guys are incredible.
I'd like to work for you.
If there's anything you... And they, of course, little did I know, they had been writing a script with me in mind. And about, I don't know, a year later, I got this script. Bryan said, he knew I didn't like to read what parts. I just like to read the story. Yeah. So he said, you know...
So in other words, you don't like to be told what part they are thinking about for you.
Exactly, because I think it taints my ability to just judge it as a story. Right. So I read it, and I thought there were fantastic roles. Yeah. But I had played, at that point, I had shot Swimming with Sharks. I had done some, I thought, kind of more flamboyant kind of roles, and I was looking for something that asked of a subtler degree of work. And I thought I said, this character of Verbal is pretty interesting. There's a lot going on, and then it switches, and so they were secretly, that was the role they wrote.
They wanted for you. There was some story that Gabriel burned.
Well, the story is, I didn't see the film at all. I think I might have looped 4 or 5 lines. I had to re-record the dialogue. So I didn't see the movie until the night Bryan showed it to us at the cast and crew screening. And I'll never forget that Gabriel Byrne, at the end of the screening, got up and went over to Bryan Singer, and they got into this heated argument because Gabriel was absolutely convinced that he was Kaiser Soze. Yeah. Just convinced. They went outside.
He did not know until he saw that screen.
Well, Bryan had been so brilliant at making each actor think they might be that it was very funny.
Which reminds me of American Beauty. There was only one ending shot, or were there alternative ending shots?
Well, in the script, actually, there was a part of the script that bookended the script, which Sam decided to cut out of the film, which was a trial. And ultimately decided that we shot it all. Yeah. It didn't involve me, but it involved others. But
because you weren't.
Yeah, I wasn't around. He just felt ultimately that, A, it wasn't necessary to tell the story, and B, it made it a bit cynical in a way that he felt the film could be uplifted and not cynical.
Yeah, I agree.
So
it also would have tied it too tight, you know, and you don't need to tie everything.
I also had these great flying sequences in my dream, in my fantasies that also got cut, that were really fun, but ultimately they ended up in the wrong movie. So I was sort of hanging in my bathrobe and pajamas by wires for many days, but that all ended up not being in the movie too. But it was right. It wouldn't have been appropriate.
Do you prepare a lot, or, I mean, what did you do for this role?
Well, I didn't do a lot because I myself was feeling very much the way Lester was. You know, I wanted to break out. I wanted to go somewhere new. I wanted to try on a new set of clothes and do something new. Yeah, so I felt that Lester and I met at exactly the right moment, and I just trusted Sam. And when you can, I feel I do my best work when I have a great director, and when you can completely put yourself in the hands of a director and trust their vision, because it's going to be their vision anyway, you know. It's not going to be my vision. I'm an element and a vessel to try to help tell this story. So when I can do that, when I can feel that, I mean, you go to a meeting with a director like Sam after you've read a thing like this, hoping and praying that they've reacted to the material the same way you have. And that was completely true in his case. And so you just say, I'm going to go with them.
So
whatever
what is
they
the-
ask, I'm going to go.
So he still tells you what he wants.
Yeah, yeah, and is incredibly helpful. I mean, we've watched a couple of clips that just bring back memories for me of Sam's very specific, you know, try this, I think you're a little too this. Because we were walking a delicate line in this movie of doing very broad comedy and very intimate, dramatic scenes.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me, one of the great things about DVDs now is that they will put a track on with director's insights. Yeah. You watch a movie and then watch it with the director's insight track. And it's
also
just extraordinary.
they'll put in scenes that Sam has said they'll put in scenes that were cut.
That's right, they will.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing me because you understand then, A, that the process is a shaping process, but also that a whole lot goes into it, that people who make movies are thinking about all kinds of alternatives, and that in the end, part of it's instinct and part of it you just say, you try it, it doesn't work, it does work.
Well, the great thing here,
and the director
too,
tells you why.
We had an opportunity to rehearse as well, and when you have a director who comes from the theater, he knows how to utilize rehearsal. I mean, I've done rehearsals for some movies where the director doesn't know what to do with rehearsals.
So what
it's
came
a bit
out of
of a waste of
rehearsal
time.
here?
Well, what came out of rehearsal here was we went back, all of us, to, I mean, Annette and I, for example, spent a good deal of our time talking about what Lester and Caroline must have been like when they first met in college, how great their relationship was, how great the sex was, what it was like when they first had their daughters, so that you can establish the level of love that had to be within these two people, because two people don't spend as much time getting each other's attention as they do if they don't really have a deep care for each other, even though it's gone south.
You understand why they would have endured the pain they did, because it was still the memory of how good it had been. You see that a little bit because Sam keeps referring to the picture in which you see them smiling together at obviously a good moment in their life. The role of the kid must have been the
Wes Bentley.
Wes Bentley played Ricky.
Everybody auditioned for this part. I mean, everybody in town.
They knew, everybody in Hollywood knew this was a big one.
Yeah, and I remember the day that Sam and I were in touch all the time as auditions were going on, and he said...
think about this.
Yeah, he said, Ricky walked in the door today. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. I said, and then he spoke. He said,
yes,
oh,
he talked.
And he knew right away. He's quite remarkable. Wes is a year and a half out of Juilliard. And he is... I think he gets, the award he gets is he gets to work for the rest of his life award, because he makes such a stunning debut in this movie, and we had a blast working. We have a scene in the movie where we get high together.
Outside, it's a great scene. Let me talk about the feature. You are doing a whole bunch of things. You have already made what films that haven't come out?
I made a film called The Big Kahuna, with Danny DeVito and
This
Peter
is your
Fasinelli.
film company.
Yeah, this is my company, Trigger Street. Produced it. We just sold it to Lionsgate Films, the company that did Affliction and Gods and Monsters last year. Did a terrific job with both those films. And it's a film that's based on a stage play, so it's essentially a one-room deal. We play 3 salesmen at an industrial lubricant convention in Wichita, Kansas. And it's about the uncommon bond between lubricant salesmen. And we did that. That'll be out next year. I did a film in Ireland that I haven't seen yet called Ordinary Decent Criminal with Mel Gibson's company.
An action adventure, I assume?
I actually play an Irish gangster.
Circa what?
Now, it's modern. And I've got a number of things that I'm developing with my company, but what I'm going to act in yet, I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know yet.
You want to work with Sam again?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I better work with Sam again.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, it's all downhill from here.
Because it was so good. As
well, yeah,
the negotiator took you to a place.
Look, I've had these 2 experiences in the last year, Iceman and American Beauty, that really have become the benchmark for me. So now it's a question of finding something that for me takes me even farther.
It is interesting. You take a guy like Wes, who comes out of Juilliard and boom, and then say you, who went a very different track. I suspect, though, that, to each their own. You're better off because you came the way you came.
Everybody's ship comes in at a different time, and I think that, what one hopes, no matter how it happens for a person, is that they handle it well, that they honor what happens to them. And I think Wes is an intelligent, very honest, and sincere young actor. I think he's going to do very, very well. But a lot of kids who make it very quickly, I think they have a tougher time, because if they don't have the kind of training that he's had, the opportunity to have. Very often, if the series is canceled and the movies dry up, by the time they're 28 or 29, you know, it's not going so well. So I was kind of lucky that I had a slow burn. It took me a while to adjust to that, as I was watching friends go off and make movies, and I was, you know, in Virginia doing, you know, understudy or, you know, other plays. So I'm kind of glad it happened for me that way, because I think I kind of grew into myself and grew into my talent.
Well, David Dimpian last night said to me, from the New Yorker Film Critics, said this thing has got Academy Award written all over it for lots of people, and including directors and cinematographers and actors. Congratulations. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Kevin Spacey, thank you for joining us. See you next time.